Hey everyone, Two Angry Frogs here, and it's time to cover the second half of Balance Druid. We previously went through Keeper of the Grove, so now let's take a look at Elune's Chosen. This is a really interesting hero spec, especially in Mythic plus AoE mode, where we permanently stay in Lunar Eclipse. We do not even have the option of going into Solar. We'll cover all you need to play Elune's Chosen, from talent selections, rotations, stat priorities, tier sets, and so on. So, let's get started. For Balance Druid, the Elune's Chosen hero talents are a mix of good and not so good. For single target, they lag behind Keeper of the Grove by a decent margin, about 7%, but for Mythic Plus and AoE, Elune's Chosen pulls well ahead of Keeper of the Grove, achieving about 5% more damage. For open world and solo play, although Keeper of the Grove is typically recommended, you can safely take either hero spec and do just fine. The Elune's Chosen hero talents are anchored with Boundless Moonlight, which buffs Fury of Elune and New Moon. For Fury of Elune, it ends with a flash of energy, hitting nearby enemies with astral damage. And for New Moon, Full Moon calls down 2 minor moons that deal astral damage and generate astral power. In the middle of the tree, we have several talents that impact Fury of Elune and New Moon. Atmospheric Exposure, which causes enemies damage by Full Moon or Fury of Elune to take 6% increased damage for 6 seconds. Stellar Command, that increases Fury of Elune damage by 15% and Full Moon damage by 25%. Lunation, which causes our arcane abilities to reduce the cooldown of Fury of Elune by 2 seconds. And New Moon, Half Moon, Full Moon by 1 second. And finally, the Light of Elune, which gives Moonfire a chance to call down a Fury of Elune for 3 seconds. At the bottom of the tree, we have the Eternal Moon, which buffs Boundless Moonlight. The Flash of Energy from Fury of Elune does 50% increased damage and generates astral power. And New Moon and Half Moon now also call down 1 minor moon. We then have a number of talents that generate astral power or increase spell damage. Moon Guardian, which causes Moonfire and Starfire to generate additional astral power. Lunar Insight, that increases Moonfire damage by 20%. Lunar Amplification, which increases the next arcane damaging ability by 3% after casting a non-arcane ability. And this can stack up to 3 times. Lunar Calling, which increases Starfire damage by 160%, but you no longer trigger Solar Eclipse. And then Arcane Affinity, which increases arcane spell damage by 3%. Finally, we have Astral Insight that buffs our Incarnation Chosen of Elune arcane spell damage by 10% and increases Convoke the Spirit's duration and number of spells cast by 25%. A utility choice node in Moondust that slows enemies affected by Moonfire, or Elune's Grace that reduces Wild Charge cooldown by 3 seconds when you use it in Bear or Moonkin form. And finally, a defensive talent, Glistening Fur, that causes Bear form and Moonkin form to take 6% less arcane damage and 3% less damage from all other magic. For our single target talent build, there are several key talents that we take in addition to the talents that increase damage of our main rotational abilities. Our primary talent selection is Fury of Elune over New Moon. We'll also take Radiant Moonlight at the bottom of the tree to increase Fury of Elune damage by 50% and reduce it to a 45-second cooldown. Our next key selection is between Wild Mushroom and Sunseeker Mushroom in row 6. You can choose to apply mushrooms manually with Wild Mushroom or make cooldown management a bit easier and passively rely on procs from Sunfire to cast the mushrooms with Sunseeker Mushroom. You do have better management of the mushrooms with Wild Mushroom, and you can get just very slightly more casts than procs that you get with Sunseeker. As we'll see, Wild Mushroom or Sunseeker Mushroom are required to take advantage of our tier set. With our next key talent, Waning Twilight in row 8, we can take advantage of the passive damage increase during the 10 seconds of damage over time when Wild Mushrooms are up, and our Moonfire and Sunfire dots are on the enemy. Finally, in row 8, we'll take Sundered Firmament between Fury of Elune, Sundered Firmament, and the Light of Elune hero talent. we can gain a lot of Fury of Elune casts and procs, which are further empowered by our hero talents. You can find our single target talent build import string in the video description below. So our primary goal in single target is to build Astral Power with Wrath, spend Astral Power on Star Surge, and maintain damage over time spells on the enemy. Celestial Alignment puts us into both eclipses, so we have a starting point with Solar Eclipse and single target. So for the opener, we'll precast Wrath 2 times, apply the Moonfire and Sunfire damage over time, cast Fury of Elune, which will also generate Astral Power, cast Celestial Alignment. You want to cast Star Surge to spend your Astral Power, cast Convoke the Spirits. Make sure you spend all of your Astral Power prior to casting this. Cast Warrior of Elune and use the instant Starfires. And if talented, cast Wild Mushroom. You can cast all 3 or hold 1 if you need mobility. During our rotation, we want to avoid capping Astral Power. Sitting on full Astral Power is a huge DPS loss, so we need to make sure we are spending it. You want to keep your dots up on all targets to activate your mastery bonus, and then use cooldowns when they're available. As with the majority of specs, Balance Druids do not have a set rotation necessarily, but rather work in a priority-based system. So for the rotation, we want to maintain Moonfire and Sunfire dots at all times to take advantage of Mastery Astral Invocation passive ability. Cast Fury of Elune. We want to prioritize casting this as often as possible. Cast Celestial Alignment. Cast Convoke the Spirits. Cast Star Surge to spend Astral Power if Star-Lord has less than 3 stacks, which gets us the 12% haste buff. You have a proc of Balance of All Things, in which we can cast it without spending any Astral Power, or you're about to cap on Astral Power. If talented, you want to cast Wild Mushroom. Again, you can cast all 3 or hold 1 if you're going to need mobility. When you need to enter Solar Eclipse during the rotation, cast Warrior of Elune when it's off cooldown, and use 2 of the instant Starfires to enter Solar Eclipse quickly. If Warrior of Elune is on cooldown, then you'll want to cast 2 Starfires to get back into Solar Eclipse. And then finally, we'll build Astral Power with Wrath. For our Mythic plus AoE talent build, we'll drop talents related to Star Surge, which are more single target focused, including Stellar Amplification, Touch of the Cosmos, and Power of Goldrun. We then pick up talents to buff our dots and AoE abilities. First is Ethereal Kindling, and when you cast Starfall, it extends the duration of your active Moonfires and Sunfires by 3 seconds, up to 28 seconds. Then we have Umbral Intensity, in which Lunar Eclipse increases Starfire damage by 15%, and an additional 30% to nearby enemies. Finally, we have Umbral Inspiration, which when we consume Umbral Embrace increases Moonfire, Sunfire, Stellar Flare, Shooting Stars, and Starfall damage by 30% for 6 seconds. For our major cooldown, we swap out Convoke the Spirits for Incarnation Chosen of Elune. Finally, in our hero talents, we'll swap out Stellar Command for Lunar Calling. Note that this will remove the ability to enter Solar Eclipse, and does impact the Mythic plus AoE Rotation, as we'll see next. You can find our AoE talent build import string in the video description below. For the Elune's Chosen Mythic plus AoE Rotation, the most interesting change from single target is the absence of Solar Eclipse. Lunar Calling requires you to go into Lunar Eclipse permanently, and it changes how you manage Eclipse. Due to the buffs to Starfire, Starfire will be used to build Astral Power regardless of the number of enemies. As with single target, you want to avoid capping Astral Power, since sitting on full Astral Power is a huge DPS loss. Remember that even in Mythic plus AoE, the opener is more for single target, such as Delve In bosses and Mythic plus bosses. For the opener, we'll precast Wrath 2 times to enter Lunar Eclipse, apply Moonfire and Sunfire dots on as many enemies as possible, cast Fury of Elune, which will also generate Astral Power, cast Incarnation Chosen of Elune, cast Starfall to spend Astral Power, cast Warrior of Elune and use the instant Starfires, and then if talented, cast Wild Mushroom For AoE, try to cast the wild mushrooms on different targets. For the Mythic plus AoE rotation, we'll want to maintain Moonfire and Sunfire dots on as many enemies as possible and at all times to take advantage of our Mastery Astral Invocation passive ability. Cast Fury of Elune, again prioritize casting this as often as possible. For multiple enemies, cast Fury of Elune prior to using your cooldowns to avoid losing DPS. Cast Incarnation Chosen of Elune. Cast Warrior of Elune when off cooldown and use instant Starfires if Lunar Eclipse is active. Cast Wrath twice to enter Lunar Eclipse if it's not active. Cast Starfall to spend Astral Power. If talented, cast Wild Mushroom. Again, for AoE, we want to hit Wild Mushrooms on different targets, and then we'll cast Starfire to build Astral Power. For Elune's Chosen, Intellect is our most important stat, increasing spell power and damage done by all of our abilities. For secondary stats, we're looking to primarily focus on Haste and Mastery. Haste increases casting speed and astral power generation, so the end result is casting more spells. Mastery, through our passive ability Mastery Astral Invocation, increases the damage of our nature and arcane spells, which is further buffed when the enemy is affected by Moonfire or Sunfire. So in order of importance, our stat priority is Intellect, followed by Haste, Mastery, Critical Strike, and then Versatility. For Balance Druids, our tier set is based around random procs of Wild Mushroom and empowering Starfall and Star Surge with it. Note that you must have Wild Mushroom or Sunseeker Mushroom talented to proc the jackpot effect. For our 2-piece set bonus, your damaging spells have a chance to hit a jackpot, growing a Wild Mushroom at a nearby enemy's location at 100% effectiveness. Casting Celestial Alignment or Incarnation Chosen of Elune always hits a jackpot. For the 4-piece set bonus, Starfall and Star Surge damage against targets affected by your Wild Mushroom damage over time effect is increased by 20%. A note here that even with the 2-piece tier, it's about a 6% damage increase in single target and higher in AoE than our previous tier set, so it is worth equipping as soon as you have 2 pieces. So of all the hero specs we've looked at so far, I think Elune's Chosen is one of the coolest thematically. It aligns really well with the fantasy and lore of the Night Elves and Tauren, believing that Elune created and chose the Wildkin to protect her sacred places. Also, the idea of permanently staying in Lunar Eclipse for AoE and the changes in the feel and rotation for that gives the playstyle a bit of variety, which is really nice. We do hope this guide helps you better understand how Elune's Chosen works and how to play it at your best. As always, let us know your thoughts and any questions you have down below in the comments. And make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you always know what's coming up next. And a special shout out to our members for your continued support. We thank you very, very much. And everyone, have a great day.